This week's update news is slightly different from our usual schedule, whereby I'm going to show you how you can maximize for one of the recent events that we've got going on in the game right now, which is part of the original 3 operation, because I've seen some people wondering how they're going to be able to get anywhere near the points required to be able to get some of the 4 free premium vehicles that are in the game, alongside how you can maximize your XP in general throughout any game so you can get through some of the unlocks for some vehicles within the game. Of course, being able to get more XP means you get more vehicles unlocked in a shorter period of time, along with not only that but playing better in general. But how can you actually do that, and how can you maximize your XP? Well, there are a couple of features as to how you can do that. The first one is, of course, damage. Damage accounts to XP within the game. The more damage you deal, generally, the more XP you're going to be able to receive within said game. Of course, the higher the damage, and of course, dependent on the victory condition of the game, you will get a lot of XP if you get the highest damage in every single one of your games. And of course, victories do make a difference, but not for the event that we're talking about here, because our event in specific, if we look at the actual conditions to the event, you only have to come as the top XP earner on your team. So how do you actually get points? Well, top XP earner gets you 5 points, coming 2nd to 5th gives you 3 points, coming 6th to 10th gives you 1 point, and as a general kind of bonus, if you play any American, British or German tanks, you're going to get 1 extra point. So getting that XP is super crucial. Of course, we touched on the fact that getting damage is going to give you that, but also the assistance damage that you get in games is going to come into that equation as well, alongside getting enemies taken out. So if we, for example, grab up a couple of recent games that I've had, this is a game in the Spartuk TVP 100 that we did have, where we came 9th in the game. A very bad game in the Spartuk, coming way below everyone else. But as you can see, we have, of course, the Spartuk coming 9th with 1400 damage, however a Black Prince getting 693. This is because he was, of course, fighting against people of a higher tier, which gives you more XP dependent on the damage that you're dealing. If you're fighting against higher tier vehicles compared to someone that plays in the same game but fights only the same tier or lower tier vehicles, you will get more XP, which is why having a top tier game means that you will get generally less XP than if you had the same result in a better in a worse matchup where you're playing up against tanks higher tier than you, which is why sometimes you'll see tier 7s coming above people that have way more damage than them, even though they are a tier below. So, of course, in this game, only 800 XP. That's because we basically didn't take anyone out of the game. We had 1400 damage and we only got 111 assistance damage as well. So barely even making the condition to get 1 XP. This game here in the Spartuk TVP, we managed to get 1400 XP. That's because we not only did a lot more damage in the game, but we got 2 enemies taken out as well. And of course, a pretty decent result. However, what you'll see here is a victory on Cliff, where we only did an extra 800 damage within our game. But as you'll see, we managed to pick up the Radley Walters medal right here for destroying 8 or 9 enemy vehicles in a battle. And with only getting 800 more damage, that's not going to boost up our XP that much. However, with this one, we pick up an extra 400 XP for essentially 800 more damage and for getting 8 enemies taken out. That's why we got way more XP. So that's kind of what you want to aim for. Obviously, XP is dependent mainly on damage and the enemies that you take out. Assistance does play a role into it, but it isn't as big as your actual damage or the enemies that you've taken out as to the calculation for the XP. From my knowledge and experience of looking through and that sort of thing, that's kind of how it works. And then, of course, you can see when you have an absolutely terrible game in the Spartuk, even though we did only get 497 damage because we got assistance, we still came above some other people, even including the T57 Heavy, who got 900 damage, and that is primarily because we are a lower tier vehicle in a top tier game, having to fight against top tiers, and I believe we actually got hit by Artie in this game, so yeah, not ideal at all. And then of course you can see a Kampfpanzer here, similar sort of situation whereby we were in a tier 10 game, picking up a lot of damage against higher tier vehicles, putting us top of the team, but also giving us so much XP that we still made it onto the scoreboard on a defeat, because with a result like this, if you were to have 4.3k damage in a win condition, you'd probably be looking at about 1800 XP compared to the 1185 that we got from here. So make sure that you win your games is of course going to be imperative, which is why you want to pick a tank that's good for this event, as well as being American, German or British. And that's where the lower tier vehicles are going to come into question. Lower tier vehicles, why are they better than playing higher tier vehicles? Well, if you're playing tier 10, it's a lot harder to get a base amount of XP that's higher than a lot of other people when you do have lower tier vehicles in your game, because even a tier 8 or tier 9 dealing half the damage that you deal in a tier 10 will often come above you in your games. So that's where you'll find yourself getting picked to the top spot in your games, is because there are lower tier vehicles dealing similar sorts of damage to you, but of course they're lower tier and they're fighting up against higher tier vehicles which give you more XP. Even in a game where you are bottom tier, if you're only fighting the same tier vehicles, you won't get the same amount of XP as if you were in the game shooting at a higher tier vehicle, which will give you more XP for doing that. And now then, of course, why are we down at the low tiers? Well, this is based on your damage, core/received, and also based on the ability that lower tier vehicles and lower tier players will typically not have their tanks optimally set up, which puts them at a disadvantage when you're playing a vehicle that is fully set up. So a Hellcat 105, for example, is going to be able to be way better than a lot of the tech tree tanks in the game, not only because it's statistically better, but it also has 350 alpha damage with its premium rounds, which not only get more damage than the standard rounds, but also get more penetration, because Wargaming know how to balance premium tanks, I swear. And of course it does sacrifice some ammo speed, but 50 meters a second to get an extra 30 damage and an extra 40 penetration. I think I'll take the premium rounds every single day of the week, basically making the AP rounds pointless in this vehicle. And it's a premium tank that earns extra silver, so a lot of the time you do not lose silver in this vehicle anyway. And then a HE round, which are basically useless anyway, because they only give you an extra 60 damage, but basically horrible pen that's only usable against light tanks, so you don't need very many of them. But this tank, why is this tank very good? Well, obviously it has the alpha damage. It also gets a ridiculous reload speed of 7.6 seconds. Now, when you look at this tank on paper, yes, it has high alpha damage, blah, blah, blah. But most people will forget that when you look at a tier 10 vehicle, for example, if we drop on over to one of the highest tier 10 alpha damage tanks in the game, the FV4005, wow, 1450 damage. That's got to be more damage tier for tier than the Hellcat 105. No, not particularly, because there's a reason for this. When I look at the FV4005, it has a 22.83 second reload, and for true reflection, if we pop in a commander here, you'll see the actual reload comparatively to the Hellcat 105. This tank reloads in 19.2 seconds with a topped out commander with all of the perks that boost up the reload speed, and it has 0.29 accuracy, 19.2 seconds, remember that. Then when we drop down to tier 6 in the Americans, you will see that when we get over there, that the Hellcat 105 has a 6.6 second reload, which is essentially almost 2.5 times the kind of output of the FV4005. So it can fire about 2.5 times for every 1 time the FV4005 fires. So tier for tier, this tank actually does more damage than the FV4005, not on the actual damage it's outputting, but on the relative damage to the hit points of the tier vehicles, because the Hellcat 105 has 710 hit points. Therefore, 350 damage is just under half the hit points of the vehicle itself. So you can essentially two-shot most of the vehicles at this tier, including things like the T-78, the Hellcats, you've got the Jacksons, you've got lots of low tier tier 6 vehicles that have about 600 hit points or lower. Some of them have more. It just really depends on what tank you're playing. Obviously the heavily armored vehicles like the AT-8 have 945, but everything is a 2 or a 3 shot to you. And essentially in the same period of time that an FV4005 can fire one shell, you can take out a full health vehicle. Now the FV4005 is not a vehicle that can take out a full vehicle within that 20 seconds. So it can take out about half of the health of the top health vehicle in the game, or about 70% of most vehicles in the game if it pens with its HESH rounds. And with 240 HESH pen, it is a problem to pen a lot of the heavily armored vehicles in the game. So yeah, whereas the Hellcat 105 never has that problem. So essentially, every single shot you fire, you're doing better tier for tier than the highest alpha damage tank at tier 10. And yeah, that's kind of where a vehicle like this starts to become very overpowered, because not only does it get the alpha damage and tier for tier better damage, but it also gets a very nice penetration value. So most tanks you fight will be able to be penned, including tier 8 vehicles, which, remember, if you're a lower tier vehicle and you're dealing damage to a higher tier vehicle, you'll get more XP. I know that this is very convoluted, but I want to cover it for you guys when you're looking at vehicles and wondering if they're good, and kind of checking them out for yourself to create weird and novel builds that I think are really fun to do in the game. Of course, with this we've gone with advanced optics. That's so that we get as much spotting damage as possible, because you want to get spotting for extra XP, and advanced concealment so that we can't get spotted and we can hit people from the distance, which increases our chances of staying undetected, and therefore means that we can survive longer in the game, which means we could potentially get more damage over the entire course of the game. That's where a lot of people go wrong when they start using things that reduce the amount of damage that you take. Things like spool liner in a lot of the heavier tier vehicles, they're relying on just receiving less damage as opposed to trying to block damage and completely mitigate the entire damage itself. And a lot of this sort of equipment will help you do that. Now, would you take advanced concealment in a heavy tank at tier 10? Probably not, but there are some advantages for a lot of the other different vehicle classes, like mediums and some of the tank destroyers and light tanks, obviously. And then advanced loader for increased DPM, so we can deal more damage quicker and use it. Now, of course, higher speed vehicles allow you to be more flexible and go in at the end of the game to pick up, mop up the damage that if you're winning the game, and of course enable you to change flanks to help win the game in a losing game sort of scenario where you think you may lose unless you move, and a lot of the slower vehicles won't have that ability to do it. And armor in this game is one of the most pointless things, in my opinion, to focus on. Yes, it comes in handy sometimes, but for the most time you're sacrificing a lot of the other characteristics where you should just be trying to avoid damage, not mitigate how much damage you're taking. And having armor really doesn't mitigate that much damage comparatively to staying more hidden and using your knowledge of the game to move around to spots where you know you won't be spotted. So that's kind of how I will play the game, and how we've managed to pick up a 61% win rate, and of course an average damage per game of 2.2 thousand. So lower tier vehicles, that's where you can get much more XP in every single one of your games and have a much bigger impact in certain vehicles. So picking high alpha damage with good reloads, and yeah, you're going to have a whale of a time. For people that don't want to spend money on something like a Hellcat 105, we have the Su-100. This is the tier 6 Soviet vehicle with 390 alpha damage and a very, very good solid premium penetration for those those higher tier games. Very, very stealthy as well, because when we pop in a commander, it becomes almost invisible. And so if you kind of move around the outskirts of the map and make sure that you're not in close quarters engagements with this thing, you're going to be much, much better off. And you can see here, the concealment goes to 214 with a view range of 418. So very, very good. That's kind of how I will play in games like this to get more damage and be very competitive even in the worst case matchups. And relatively fast as well. Of course, there are loads of different options at tier 6. You don't just have to play tank destroyers. There's a lot of medium tanks and stuff that do very well. Of course, we've all got the T-34-88 recently, which is a great one to actually use as well. Overall, I think that's kind of what I wanted to showcase as the starter bit for today's video, just how you can maximize your XP for not only the challenges that we've got at the moment, which is the original 3 and get as many points as possible, but also for when you are trying to complete contracts. For example, maybe you want to get the Spatuk, which is the tier 8 Czechoslovakian tank. All of these operations, they all require XP. And in the future, all events require XP, which I hope this video has kind of given you an indication as to how you can get it. I'm not going to run through specific game examples because at the end of the day, I think this video could be like 5 hours long. And although a lot of you probably will find some uses out of it, you're probably not going to sit through 5 hours of gameplay me talking about what exactly I did in a specific condition. And that's what all of the videos that we have on the gameplay are kind of set up to do, to showcase some of the positions and why we're thinking about moving to different spots. And of course, if you kind of use some of those tactics, maybe you'll be able to replicate them, and maybe you'll be able to do them better than I do to get even more XP on average than I do. So with that being said, hopefully that's helped you out for that, but let's have a look at the event that we've also got going on this week and the update news surrounding it. Now, the update news for this week includes a variety of different factors, one of them being the brand new encounter game mode that comes in the form of Conquer the Desert. Now, this is essentially a running all-week event, which is a tier 8 encounter mode where True Vision is disabled. The match duration is 600 seconds, so you got 10 minutes. Team size is 7v7, which comes in line with some of the Lucky 7 events and stuff like that we've had, except this is tier 8 tanks. You can play light tanks, medium tanks, heavy tanks, and tank destroyers. No artillery within this mode, and of course you can access it by just going into the main map mode. This is in line, I guess, with the June event that they've got going on, where the Conquer the Desert is, you know, June, Arrakis, that sort of thing, and the introduction of probably one of the best events that I've enjoyed looking at as a whole. And of course, the maps that we do have is Sand River, we've got Hellfire Pass, and this is the small one. So for the older review, this is Scorpion Pass, Airfield, El Haluf, Steps, and Ghost Town, all of which will be featured as the maps for today. Now, unfortunately, that is it is a bit of a pain because this sort of game mode is not particularly the funnest. It also earns you 2,000 or more XP in any number of battles to gain an additional point for the original trio challenge. So if you are playing this mode and you specifically want to play through this and potentially have pretty quick games, because it's 7v7, there's not 15 enemies on each team, you can get an additional point, but you of course have to be very consistently coming in the top to get those points. But yeah, an additional point for the original trio challenge for playing the mode. Respawns are disabled, so you can't keep respawning in this mode, and bots are also enabled in the game mode to keep the game flowing, I assume, because they can't guarantee how many people are going to be playing this mode. But if you are interested in points, this could be a way to go. But one of the biggest things for this is the trade-in event and the tech tree sales. So for example, if you've been looking at trying to purchase some tier 8 vehicles and you've been waiting for Wargaming to sale some of the vehicles, then that is exactly what they're doing. Tier 8 tech tree sales will be available for everyone, and essentially you'll be able to purchase them at 30% the silver cost, which means this will be really good. And usually with this you will get discounts on some of the premium vehicles as well, but no kind of guarantee so far, so just be aware that there may be some premium tech tree sales as well. We haven't got any articles for that exactly right now, but of course the trade-in event we do have an article for, so we can open that one up and have a look at what this one has to offer too. So the tank trade-in event is a spring cleaning event, essentially getting rid of some of the tanks that you want to get rid of, and of course then trading them in for half the value of their gold value. So say a premium tank costs 10,000 gold, when you trade it in it will put 5,000 gold towards the tank that you are picking from the trade up list, so the actual tanks that are available to get within the trade-in event. And there is a whole list of tanks that you can put into the trade-in event as well. So there's multiple lists. We're not going to go through every single tank as there is a lot, and you'll just see them come up in the tech tree. Essentially what you want to do when the trade-in event comes live is go into the premium tech tree, and then you'll see vehicles that have a green symbol. This means that they're available to either purchase or trade in vehicles for, and you can essentially trade in some of the vehicles. Now, things to note is that you can't trade in vehicles, multiple of them into one vehicle. You can only trade in one vehicle per trade up, which is kind of annoying. And yeah, once you do that, you are going to lose access to the vehicle that you previously had, and you also won't be able to get the vehicle again unless you purchase it once again for the full cost of gold or whatever the cost of that tank is. Now, sometimes this is actually quite a good event, because what Wargaming can do if you're after a vehicle in specific is, say for example with the recent operation where you can pick up the HMH Centurion, you can actually submit some of these vehicles into the trade-in event. Now unfortunately you can't submit the HMH Centurion apparently into this. Let's have a look actually. HMH doesn't appear like it's on the list. The Atomic Centurion, that's not the one, that's the opposite. So no. So far can't submit that into the actual event, which is the one that you'll pick up from the Arrakis event. So just be aware that unfortunately that isn't in here, so you can't get a free 50% off essentially, because what will happen when you get that tank, if you already own it, is you'll be refunded the silver value of the vehicle that you already have. So if you can trade in that tank for half the gold value, you can essentially get gold for that vehicle, and of course get a good discount towards a next premium vehicle, which is great. But of course it's not in here, but just be aware that in future times, and this event comes out fairly regularly, you can do that. So just be aware of that. Of course, the actual tanks that we have to trade up, so these are the vehicles available for purchase with the trade-in event, where you can put in vehicles that you're never going to play. Something that I would recommend is that if you are dead set on, getting rid of a vehicle and you're never ever going to play it again, then this event is worth it. If it's a vehicle that you're going to get again from an event that you're just going to end up with silver from, and you're not bothered about the silver, you just want to be able to get a discount on a vehicle, then that is the only times that I would ever use the trade-in event. If you're using it just to get a tank, it is one of the worst ways of doing it, because essentially you're getting rid of one tank that you already own to get a discount to be able to purchase another vehicle from Wargaming. So in terms of economically, it's a really bad way of doing it, because you're getting rid of a full price tank that you paid for to get a discount of not even the full amount on the next vehicle. Then yeah, it can be a bit of a pain. So just be aware that this is one of those events that seems good, but if you are after playing some of those vehicles again in the future, you won't have access to them when you trade them in. So just be aware of that, and you'll have to rebuy it at the full cost essentially. So yeah, just be aware. Either way, the Soviets, we got China, Sweden, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, Italy, etc. All of these vehicles are available. I'm going to highlight some of the better ones that you could pick up from this event if you are wanting to trade in some of the old premiums that you have and you're not going to play again. The top ones, so for me, in terms of how I enjoy the game and playing some fun vehicles, the first one is the M56 Scorpion. This is a tier 7 tank destroyer that's really cheap to begin with, so when you do trade in your vehicle, you can actually get this one for free if you do have a tier 8 heavy tank, because at the end of the day, the tank will cost 5,150 gold. If the base cost of your tank is over that, you'll essentially get this tank for free, or not for free, but you know, you'll get it, and then maybe even have some gold left over from trading in your vehicle. So it depends on the original tank that you're putting in. But that's a fun tank that I enjoy playing and giving something a little bit different, a bit more novel into the game. The next one is the Iron Rain. This is the Borsig Waffenträger, one of the most broken tier 8 tank destroyers that's very, very good and fun and yet again novel. It's a Borsig with a 3-shot autoloader with 490 alpha per shot. It's really fun to play. It isn't the fastest, of course it's a Borsig, and yeah, it's just a Borsig with a 3-shot autoloader that's actually really fun to play. Then we have the Aufklärungs Panzerpanther. This is the tier 7 light tank that is capable of ramming people. Yes, the Ram Panzer or the Ram Panzer Panther. Really, really fun vehicle to play. Of course, it's a Panther that can go 60 kilometers an hour. So when you're playing at tier 7 and you're ramming into an AMX 1375 with a tank that weighs the same as a Panther, essentially, yeah, it doesn't go very well for the AMX 1375, and of course it has a pretty nice main armament as well. Even if it does lack penetration in the standard rounds, you can always fire premium to make up for that discount, and of course it's a premium vehicle as well. Then we move on. The French one's nothing too spectacular here. The Cromwell Snakebite is a fun one. It's a super fast tier 6 vehicle that can go, I believe, like 80 kilometers an hour base. Yep, which can go up to about 90 when you're using some of the speed boost equipment. I don't believe you can use both speed boost equipment in this tank, but you can still go like 90 kilometers an hour. Just be aware that it turns really, really quickly, and you often end up flying, barrel rolling across the map. So yeah, either way, it's a really, really fun tank to have. Then you've got the Shashka SU-130PM, very, very good vehicle. It's the skinned version of the SU-130PM. So if you've ever wondered why there's a bush on the front of it, this is a skinned version of the SU-130PM, not the standard one. But yeah, really, really good tank. Then you have, where is it? The Emil 1951's a kind of cool Swedish vehicle that is essentially a better Emil 1 at the same tier. And then the Skoda T56. This is the Skoda heavy tank that has a double shot with 460 alpha damage per shell with a ridiculous intricate reload, being able to deal 920 damage in one singular go, which, yep, is horrifically bad for anyone else that playing up against you. And then you've got the Progetto M3546, which is good, the AMX 13 SS11 TCA, which is the Cold War tank that I really enjoyed, and has a missile launching light tank with a main armament as well to go alongside. And then the rest of them, nothing particularly too spectacular. Maybe the Magash is actually okay, but I don't know. And of course, that is kind of where I would go with some of these tanks out of the lot of them if you're interested in picking up some pretty competitive, fun or novel vehicles that are just a bit of a laugh to play. But either way, not the most amount of competitive tanks in there, but a sprinkling of a couple that I found to be very good. Of course, let me know what you would pick out of the lot, and yeah, hopefully you liked this video and found it useful, or at least are going to get a couple more points from playing every single time you play from that starter clip. But either way, I'll see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.